Hi, my name is Lisa Meyerhofer. I play principal flute at Opera in the Ozarks. During the year, I'm also assistant principal flute and piccolo with the Omaha Symphony and principal flute of the Des Moines Symphony. Today, I'm going to be showing you some tips for working on your all-state music for this year, and I hope this helps you when you're practicing. Enjoy! In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Karg-Elert Etude in G major. It's number 8 in your book. It's marked leggero, grazioso e veloce, so light, graceful, and fast. Out of the suggested tempos for you, 100 to 110 is a good balance between still being fast while being able to play most of it very accurately and very cleanly. If you want to go 120, awesome. Just make sure you don't have to slow down anywhere and it still comes out clear. The general pianissimo marking for the whole etude, think light, delicate. Don't worry too much about being like whispery soft. Just think of being secretive, light, energetic. And stay soft enough so that when you do have a mezzo forte, it's nice and dramatic. The pianissimo marking can actually be used to your advantage, especially when you have to play low and soft. It's obviously a little bit harder to play loud and low and crisp and clean staccato, so the pianissimo can actually help you in a way. Really plan out your breaths here. A lot of the ones that are recommended online are great, so the end of measure 4, the end of measure 8, whenever there's a rest, of course, the end of measure 10, right before the end of measure 12, I would suggest, so the pick up to measure 13, the end of measure 14, the end of measure 18, and the end of measure 20. If you need to take something, a breath in measure 22, actually I do recommend that so you get through the ending and make a good final ending. In measure 22 you can breathe either after the very first note or before the very last slur, so before the last 3 notes. Either one works, just figure out how to work it into your plan as you go along, whatever works better for you. Let's see, so our Karg-Elert is very exciting to play once you get through all the hard work that's involved in it. So take your time, learn things a couple measures at a time, really make sure you're solid on all the notes. There are patterns you can find along the way, little progressions along the way that help your brain make sense of all this. So a good example is measure 4. It's the same interval grouping of notes, just shifted down every 4 notes, every 4 30-second notes, it shifts down a little bit. So if you know what that's supposed to sound like, then you can kind of catch yourself if you miss a note along the way, like, wait, that interval didn't sound right. Let's see, same kind of idea in measure 12. And measure 12, of course, is probably the trickiest one of the whole etude, except for one other, which we'll talk about in a second. But so really practice it slow to make sure, not so much the fingerings are the hard part, it's more negotiating the big leaps. So you have to stay nice and relaxed, flexible, so you still make the clear difference between all the octaves. So your middle notes are going to feel like the anchor point, and then you have to narrow the tunnel for your air, basically, to get to the high note, relax down, and then open up to get to your low notes. So it's all got to happen very quickly, so flexibility is really important. So warming up every day on octaves with a tuner, very recommended. And let's see, measure 22 is actually another measure that's sort of a progression, but you always have the top note as the same. So that G is always going to be there, but the rest of the notes kind of shift down. So that might help you out with that section. And as for measure 19, this is the one that I mentioned besides measure 12 where you're going to want to spend a lot of time on it. Practice slow. Of course, that's the answer to a lot of things. Practice slow, but I would recommend using what I call the 7 times rule. So practice it at a moderate speed. You don't have to go up to tempo for this to work really well. but take it at a gradual tempo, not too fast, not too slow, just enough that you know you can play it accurately, and do it 7 times in a row perfectly. If you miss even one note one time, you have to start over. So if you've never done this thing before, it's kind of intense. So if you want to try 3 or 4 times for one day until you get the hang of it, and then you can try 7 times in a row a couple days later or something like that. It takes a lot of focus, but if you can get through it, you'll find then the next day that whole measure is so much easier, and you'll still have to work on it, but it'll get easier and easier very quickly. So I'll demonstrate a little. So that's one time, perfect. Got to do that 7 times total. If one measure is a little tough at first, do half the measure, and then you can expand to the rest of it. You can do 2 measures at a time. I don't recommend doing more than a few measures at a time with this method, but if that's a good way to push yourself, go for it. And once you get all the notes, just try to keep yourself in the zone the whole time you go through it, and just enjoy the flow of it, because it's really fun once you get it down. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Karg-Elert Etude in B-flat minor. This is marked as number 35 in your book. It's marked sciolto, elegante e rapido. So easy, unrestrained, and fluent, elegant, and fast. So it's graceful, but it's very energetic, graceful etude. And it starts piano, and a lot of it is the context of piano until you get to the end, but it's with all these hairpins all the time, so it feels like waves, and it's just constantly moving up and down. That's what it feels like when you get into a groove and you just play right through it. So, unlike the other Karg-Elert etude you have, there's not so much articulation involved, but there's a lot more finger work involved. So it'll take a lot of time and patience to work through some of these spots. I'll give you some suggestions. Definitely mark the spots where you want to use your B-flat thumb key versus not use your B-flat thumb key. If you've never considered a special type of notation, I'll show you what I use to remind myself to use the thumb key. So this means put it on, take it off, and whatever's in the brackets, you leave your thumb key down. You could use open and close circles, or just on and off. There's all these different ways you can mark things, but I do recommend for something this complex that you mark it very clearly so you don't have to think so hard about it. As for some spots to really focus on, just like in the other video for the other Karg-Elert etude, the 7 times rule for practice is what I like to use. So pick a small spot that's really bugging you, isolate that, take it a little under tempo, make sure you can play it completely accurately straight through, but you have to do it 7 times in a row. The moment you miss a note, there's a lot of notes here, the moment you miss a note you have to start over. So you're going to learn this very quickly if you use that method. Examples of measures where I would definitely do this: measure 5, measure 6, I would say measure 10, measure 12, the really awkward ones, but you could do it throughout the whole thing too. And you don't even have to do whole measures at a time. So you could do 1 slur or 2 slurs, any type of grouping that you want. And then as far as groupings go, Karg-Elert is very clever with a lot of what he writes, and you have to kind of dig through it to find a lot of the progressions and things that he has. But a lot of this etude is built on chords that just keep increasing or decreasing in pitch. So, like measure 6, for instance, is a good example of that. It's a little different there. It's not always a perfect pattern, but if you find the stuff that's in common from one group to another, it can help you learn things. So that's not the perfect example, but you kind of get the idea. There's a lot of chromatic groupings in here, so if you find those, that should be a lot easier. You just go, okay, that's a chromatic scale, got it. Warm up on a chromatic scale every day, and that'll help a lot. Groupings, even without a pattern, I would suggest a few different spots to think about. One of them in particular would be measure 5. I'm going to take the pickups and I'm going to pause kind of to show you the groupings in between notes, the way I was thinking about them. So you can learn the notes not based on beats, but based on the contour of the notes. Okay, these go up, stop, these go up. Here's the next group of notes. And you can pick any type of grouping you want. That's the one that makes sense to me when I listen to it. Another example would be pickups to measure 10. So at the end, the pattern shortens itself a little bit, but that's another set of groupings you could use. Here's a good measure for that progression, just a little down by a half step every time, measure 12. So first slur, one set of notes. Next slur, the same intervals, down a half step, and then so on. So that's a great spot to practice like this. And it's a good spot to work on changing from high to low, kind of like the other Cargaillard etude also. E-aw, e-aw. Going down from the high to the low, kind of like a donkey sound. So think more about sound on the low notes so they come out more present and match the high notes. And then finally, the last couple measures. So measure 15, this is another good spot. Here I would follow the groupings exactly like they're written with the slurs. And just know that, okay, that last note, the bottom note is always going to be an F, so you don't have to think about the bottom note so much as the top ones every time. So just some ideas on various ways you can do this. Just break it apart, pull every note apart, figure out how everything relates to everything else. And just by digging into it that much, you'll just start processing it and learning it instead of just trying to plow through it every day. It'll give you more to do. Hopefully it'll be more interesting, and maybe you'll discover something that I didn't find either. So have fun. In this video, I'm going to talk about the first to know etude in E flat major. It's number 41 in your book. It's a straightforward, melodic, slow etude, very pretty, lots of expression. It does say con espressione and dolce, so sweet sound. Really think about what you want to do with tone color in this one and with vibrato, make sure the dynamics are all accurate and all that. Do practice with a metronome, make sure, use eighth notes for a while, make sure everything lines up exactly where it should, especially when you have things that go from duple, so eighth notes, 16th notes, straight into triplets. Make sure those are in the right place and the correct length for each note. Especially focus on measure 15 because there's so many notes in there. Make sure they're all in the right spot and you can fit all those chromatic scales in there. Be careful towards the end where it turns around in that measure from B flat to B natural. That can catch you, so mark that. And then I'll quickly show you the spots that are mentioned online with the instructions there, all the grace notes. So it's very clear online, but I'll show you what those should sound like. A couple spots. So measure 6 with the turn, it's a written out turn in grace note form. Those 4 notes should all fit into the span of an eighth note. So very melodic. They're not really quick at all. And then same thing in measure 14, same idea. Measure 20 is a little different. So 3 of those 4 grace notes are going to fit into a triplet in the first eighth note of that whole grouping. So they'll sound like this. And then as far as the trills go in measure 23, obviously practice without the trills first, just make sure everything's even. Add the trills, you want them to be quick and fluttery, but not too long, otherwise you'll lose some timing. And then right after that, the grace notes, again, practice without the grace notes first, because there's a lot of notes here. And then add them really quickly in there. These are the quickest that you're going to have in the etude. And I do recommend using your trill key for the C to D. As far as expressive qualities of this etude, vibrato, definitely use vibrato throughout. Start with a sweet, warm, gentle vibrato, and then as things get more intense and higher and louder, use a quicker, more intense vibrato. So I'll show you an exercise I like to use. I use this app called Tunable because you can see the wavelengths of what you're doing. So I'll show you one-handed here. So this is kind of like a pitch bend exercise, but if you can do this steadily, it also becomes a vibrato exercise. So pick whatever note you like. Let's try to start in tune and then bend the pitch down and back up steadily. So starting a little bit lower here. And then, just like you would practice something like double tonguing, slowly increase the tempo or the rhythm. So quarter notes, then eighth notes, and triplets until it's fast enough that you can't hear the rhythm of the vibrato anymore. So my finger was slipping a little bit off the key there, but you get the idea, and you would take a little bit longer to do this than I just showed you, but using the tuner might seem like it takes some of the magic out of vibrato, but it gives you the muscle capabilities to vary your vibrato. So if you can structure it in different ways using the tuner, then it feels a lot more natural when you have to add it at different points in your etude. So just enjoy the emotion that's in this. And just make it sound lovely throughout and dolce, sweet, as it says. I hope you found some or all of these thoughts to be helpful as you're working on your music. Best of luck, have fun, and thanks for watching.